introduction, my name is Rahman or Rahman or Raman Jamal, depending on your cultural literacy. My background is my official title for my job is a teaching artist, and I didn't plan to go into that field as an artist. I'm just very passionate about creative expression and music, and I found a really viable inroad into making the most difference, not just through the music industry, but more importantly through the education industry, and basically getting up in front of young people and being able to speak to them direct and have a platform to really give them the game, which I think is the purpose of any good teacher, to really speak the truth. And so we did a PMA back in April, and this was a preliminary initial discussion, and some of us were there, and I'm just going to recap a little bit about what was discussed there. We had a few different presenters. We started the presentation with a discussion about parenting, because parenting is really the first school that we have, or whoever is raising us from infancy. That's where we begin to learn. The woman who presented, her name is Sandy McCready. She is she has a creative arts preschool that she basically created herself. She started with the creative arts enrichment program, and she would travel around to different schools, self-employed, and then eventually was able to invest into a space and start a school. But she always knew that she wanted to be involved in early childhood development. She saw the importance of that. So she went and got a master's degree and everything. But when she became a parent, there's no manual for that. Pretty much all that academic knowledge kind of goes out the window, and you're there with your child and you're learning from the school of life. The conclusion that she came up with, the first thing that we need for our future generations is the most important thing a parent needs is a support system. Whether that comes from a significant other or family member or community, it takes a village, right? And this is something that, as one of the conclusions that we came from the last PMA, was we need to figure out what our support systems are, where they are, how they should look. So there's a couple questions that we want to answer. Sorry, I got to grab my notes so I get the mic. I know the first question was, I think actually I got it. The first question is, what are the obstacles that are facing parents, that are facing teachers, that are facing students to obtaining the knowledge that we need in this new day and age? And let me just anchor one more point as an opening framework, is that we want to recognize, and we want everybody to recognize, that we're at an incredible, like a human civilization shift transition, as big as any that there's ever been, from man discovering fire, to separate him from the animal kingdom, to man discovering water, to go from a hunter-gatherer species to creating city-states around irrigation, to man discovering industry and factories to create things, and changing the labor force. And now we're at our technological transition, going from industry into a technological age of information, digital age. So every time that shift happens, it changes everything. Like the way that we relate to each other. You can see this through social media. You can see this through, kids growing up not knowing what it's like to not have internet, right? I think maybe some of us, I don't know, Gabe, was internet. Do you remember a time when there was no internet? All right, so you got to remember the generation there, okay? Yeah. So we have this kind of intergenerational dialogue going on where, those of us who know what it's like to live without having these resources are living have a different perspective on life, on how humans relate, than those who have just kind of grown up with that as a given. So we want to be aware of those things. So the good news about that is that it's sort of like how we approach learning and schools is like there's no preset model that a person can say, oh, well, this works. is pretty much where we're creating the models and seeing if they work or not. And today we have, like our presenters, are going to share with you what's worked for them in their positions, because there are strategies that work very, very well. So we want to become familiar with those, and I'm sure some of us have had some experience with that ourselves, of what works, what's not. If you're a teacher, that's pretty much your life, is figuring out this worked or this didn't. So we want to answer the question. So what are the obstacles to getting what we want? What are some models around different systems of learning? We're going to hear about how the American schooling system is a very specific, the structure of it is very specific to reinforce certain ideologies about our culture that oftentimes when we're young, when we start to become acculturated into that, we just start to assume is the way that things are. Until you go outside in a different culture, maybe you experience the way that different cultures teach their young, you might just assume that that's the way everybody learns or should learn. In fact, that's what we're told, is that, this is the best way to learn. Well, we're going to poke holes in that because there's a lot of things that we're missing. So looking at other models of teaching and education is going to be something that we address today. And third question, it's in my notes, but I've got to read. What are the steps, basically, of going from, what do we need to do from here? Once we can identify these things, what are some actionable steps? And if that's follow-up meetings and I know we have some people here too that have thought about this stuff very, very thoroughly and have come up with actionable plans. And so we want to bring that out in front, add our opinions to that, see if we can come together and continue, basically start working, taking steps towards these in our various areas of influence. So, we're going to start off here with a presentation by someone that I've worked with personally in Alameda Juvenile Halls. He is a specialist in the area of alternative education for populations that have undergone serious trauma or neurological challenges, developmental. Okay. So understanding how do you reach populations. Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Come on in, grab a seat. We're just getting started. So how do you reach populations who have undergone developmental trauma at an early age? What are some of the things that are going on in the brain? And similarly, for each one of us, because whether we're aware of it or not, whatever we experienced when we were infants growing up into toddler and our brain was developing, these things stick with us, and they're very embedded in a lot of the decision makers as well. So we want to become cognizant of this. So I'm going to introduce Peter Giordano. His organization is Storyteller Project, and well, this guy knows his stuff. So we're going to do a little bit of a presentation to break down the different stages that psychosocial development starts.